T-minus 10, 9, 8... I forgot the rest. Let's just get going. And we have liftoff. What a historic day. Finally leaving behind the Sega Genesis and heading off to a brave new dimension on the Sega Saturn. This is one small step for Sonic YouTube content, one giant leap for the game Apologist. It should be a nice smooth transition. Should be no problem getting... Oh my god!
What is this place? This looks like an interstellar amusement park. I've been here before, but now it's back in HD. Yes, it seems Sonic Colors has orbited around and come back again, but this time on modern hardware. Well, I know we were going to be talking about some early 3D Sonic outings, but, Sega just re-released this. Might as well take a short detour and talk about this for a bit. Shouldn't be a whole lot to say, honestly. Sonic Colors was well liked by the general gaming community, and while it can divide some Sonic fans, it's generally considered a good game. This should be a nice, easy win for Sega to just release while fans are waiting for the next big Sonic project. Surely no problems could come from... Oh, no. Hello there. I'm Nick, and this is the Game Apologist, where we talk about the good and bad games. Sega just couldn't help themselves. Somehow, Sonic Colors can now be considered, by many, a bad game. I wasn't planning on talking about this game for quite a while. Hell, I wasn't even considering talking about it on the Game Apologist show. Maybe unapologetic, maybe something else, but it certainly wasn't a bad game, and re-releasing it should have been the easiest of wins, placating review sites with one of their most beloved games, while allowing fans a chance to play a 3D, well, occasionally 3D, Sonic game outside of the Wii. But remember, this is Sega re-releasing a beloved Sonic title, and they can't seem to do that without further tarnishing the reputation, not only of the game, but of the brand itself. Glitches galore, questionable music remixes, graphical effects and tweaks to mechanics, and new features for returning players that have all the effort of... They literally give you a keychain. I still had some issues with the core game design, and I had to wonder if part of it was just from me playing this on a stream or being rusty with it, and both of those are absolutely factors for a couple of sessions. But even with all that said, there are still things that bug me about the overall package. So I had to go back to the Wii version to see if these issues were always present. And just for good measure, I popped in my copy of the DS version of Sonic Colors, and I was originally planning on talking about that separately in an episode of Portable. But playing all this stuff so close together, I realized there was just too much to say about all three versions in relation to each other, and that includes the changes and glitches brought in by Ultimate. So since this is the first time I've spoken about the game in any real capacity on my channel, it's best we just do this all at once. If Pixar made a movie about Scientology, you'd get this game. Eggman has built an interstellar amusement park as a front for farming an alien species known as the Wisps, and that word is still so frustrating to say in plural form. He's gathering all these little dudes to use their hyper-go-on energy. That is the name they use. I don't know why they just couldn't call it color energy or wisp energy, but sure, fine. They use that term and then never use it again. But yeah, anyway, he's using this to power his mind control ray to take over the planet. It's up to you as Sonic to save the day with the help of your multicolored sperm monsters. Spooge the rainbow. Taste the rainbow. Okay, so you have all of these creatures with amazing abilities that are amplified when combined with a host, and you use all of these resources to build a mind control ray. Eggy, you have an amusement park. You are already controlling the populace with capitalism. And hang on, I'm sorry. Wasn't an amusement park the goal of multiple games? Wasn't he trying to build a theme park? I mean, you have built other space fortresses and other carnivals, just for shits and giggles. We literally had Eggman Land in the game previous to this one. Hell, he's even managed to chain planets together before. And now he has a whole goddamn solar system. So you finally get everything you ever wanted, and all you can do with that is build a mind control ray. I mean, these creatures have so many other potential uses, and when you see the mind control thing actually in use, it's a massive beam that looks like it takes a ton of energy when used on just just one beam. And it looks like it also has to keep a steady flow going. That is so much work for what basically amounts to marionette strings. Though there could be something there about a cynically built giant theme park carelessly abusing natural resources while using a mind control ray on the general masses. Sonic, you had the spinballs to tackle the plumber. You were so close to talking shit about the mouse.
You don't talk to me like that, you little piece of shit.
It's dumb, it's silly, and it's not my actual gripe. I just wanted to whine and make jokes. But I guess my actual problem is putting all the focus on the Wisps without keeping the focus on them. Just because the story is simple doesn't mean they can't keep a consistent theme and a little more synergy between gameplay and narrative. Let me get into what I mean. So these Wisp things, right? When they are drained of their energy, they become the frenzy type, and according to everything I'm reading, they are at that point at least somewhat subservient to Robotnik. Seems to make a silly mind control laser useless if you have superpowered body-possessing aliens. And failing that, why not drain a specific Wisp and convert its power into a boss fight? And yes, they do utilize it in the final boss, and it's pretty good. But it might have been cool to see that play into battles on each level as opposed to the copy-paste nonsense we got instead. Maybe you have to use the same Wisp in a more creative fashion, or maybe you have to use one Wisp power against the other. I mean, I like the general design of the boss fights as they are, but you can literally end a few of them in 1 or 2 hits with the Wisps themselves. They use them as a shortcut, not as the means to figure out the battle itself. And that's just ridiculous. You could have had fights against Dark Wisps, or they cause harm to you and you can only use them when you unlock their power. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here. They keep alluding to Dark Wisp stuff in the cutscenes, and I just don't think they really ever do anything interesting with it outside of Frenzy. And moving on from that, Planet Wisp shows off that classic Sonic message of environmentalism and has a lot of potential and is a great moral for kids. But again, I don't think they've utilized that story point too well. Hell, you could have a message about tampering with nature going awry. Maybe instead of a mind control beam malfunctioning by random dumb luck, Eggman instead loses control of a giant mother Wisp who begins to rampage on the planet's surface below. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. The core premise is, again, it's fine. It's nothing crazy. They do still emphasize the point of environmentalism and saving the Wisp species, so they do play around with it. All in all, it's fine. What's less fine are the character interactions and, well, just the cutscenes in general.
Nothing will stop me. What? Sonic!
Who you calling nothing?
He means since the boss said nothing will stop me, and Sonic here is going to stop him, it's like the boss was calling Sonic nothing.
Great! I thought nobody would get that.
It is incredible how much time this script spends talking about comedy without ever being funny. This does lean towards a younger audience, I get that. And in that case, yeah, I'm sure little kids will find some of this stuff hilarious. But I'm a grown man whining about video games on the internet, so clearly my opinion matters more. I know the writers have had to deal with a lot of undeserved trash from fans, but let's not forget, these are real people and they matter more than fictional characters. That said, yes, a lot of these jokes are very cringy. I'm just not a fan of the cutscenes in general, if I'm honest. Camera feels a bit static, and the music reminds me of those obnoxious soundtracks found in the 4Kids dubs of Sonic X. Back when the game initially launched, I shrugged all this stuff off, but yeah, this does feel a bit neutered and somewhat at odds with the high-speed energy of the boost gameplay. Sonic looks like a character that should always be in motion. Even when standing still, there should be this dynamic energy to the delivery, the camera placement, and of course the animation. But these static cameras mixed in with dialogue that seems to be aimed at toddlers, yeah, I can understand why people have such a large problem with it. I don't hate every joke. The Eggman announcements are, for the most part, brilliant.
Please refrain from throwing coins, trash, or small children into the reflecting pools. If you experience explosive decompression, please try to avoid staining the seat cushions. Those things are expensive. We seem to be losing pressure on level 17. Please hold your breath against the harsh vacuum of space until you pass out from oxygen starvation. After that, you won't care. Enjoy the ride!
I would have loved more stuff like that, and it totally fits with what's going on in the game. Maybe they bumped up the volume a bit, cut down on some of the jokes that don't seem to end. But even as they are, for the most part, I love them. I feel like they add a lot of character to the world without getting in the way of gameplay. But then you have other scenes like this one, where Sonic is just talking shit to a spaceship.
Hey, did somebody here order a clobbering? Are you sure? It says somebody ordered an extra large clobbering topped with everything.
He looks like a hobo screaming at traffic on the freeway. What are you doing, Sonic?
Are you talking to the broken robot who can't hear you?
I'll tell you what's broken, Tails. It's the system. It's the system that's broken. Sonic, did you escape from the clinic again? I got the need for speed. Oh God, you're back on methamphetamines. I'm at a carnival in space. I'm calling the cops. Now, some of these jokes have become notorious for good reason, and a lot of them overstay their welcome. But as they aren't too bad. If they had just reacted a little bit differently, I think these could have been some genuine gems.
Hey, where are you going?
To find Baldy McNosehair, of course. I'm totally calling him McNosehair.
Careful, Sonic. Remember what happened the last time you tried to make fun of Robotnik's physical appearance?
I am Dr. Robotnik, the greatest scientific genius in the world.
Whatever you say, Eggman.
You called him Eggman and he made an entire empire out of it. Dude is the king of body positivity. Keep this up and Baldy McNosehairs will be fast food franchises all over the country. Do you think they serve Egg McMuffins?
Hey, Tails, you missed the BBBE.
Huh?
Something I'm looking for on the personals on Craigslist every night, Tails.
I grabbed a bite at the bucket of sushi.
What's the verdict?
I shit everywhere, Sonic, and then I puked all over myself, and it's all in my fur. My tails are caked together. I can't fly anymore, Sonic. I'm all covered in my own shit. Like, I wasn't kidding. They spend so much time either explaining jokes or explaining that somebody they're talking to isn't being funny when it's never funny either way.
I know you're trying to be clever with this whole amusement park pun thing, but it's just coming off lame.
Sonic, if you're gonna critique Eggman, you need to come back with something funnier. You could try and actually intimidate the guy or say something hilarious. You could say something like, "Who do you think you are, you piece of human trash? Do you know who I am? I'm Sonic the goddamn Hedgehog. I can do whatever I want. I'm running through your house naked. I don't give a shit. You had to build a whole ass theme park just to show the world you're this big of a clown? Nobody's ever gonna come here. Nobody cares about you. Your robots don't even like you. You can't even build a friend. I am a literal animal, and I've gotten more action from human women than you ever will. Nobody loves you. You are going to die in the cold, dark void of space, and not even this giant neon grave will be enough to make people remember you. I'm gonna wreck your entire world, Eggman. Oh, you're proud of that name? Well, I'm gonna crack you open and use your innards to make myself an omelet. But that robot cleanup joke was actually pretty good. I think we're all in agreement on that.
When you consider what we're doing from a robot's point of view, it's actually pretty gruesome.
Don't think about it.
Yeah, the overlong jokes weren't great, but I also have issue with everything else in the cutscenes, as I've already explained. And unfortunately, this wasn't the biggest deal for me when it comes to the game itself. So I apologize, we've got plenty more to nitpick. In fact, we could call a giant chunk of this video Picky Nick's Nitty Picks. I don't know. I need to stress, overall, this is a very good game. We've known that for quite a long time. But I have my biases, I have my preferences, and we love to overanalyze. So if you don't agree with me, I don't know, I'm not too worried about it. I could probably beat most of you up. Let's talk about the gameplay itself, which features the streamlined, boost-styled gameplay found in Sonic Rush and Sonic Unleashed prior to that point, and depending on the version of colors you're playing, the mechanics will feel more akin to one of those two games. And going by the reviews of the day, you would assume that colors consists of nothing but the daytime stages of Sonic Unleashed, the one part of the title that pretty much everyone agrees is pretty damn good. And that's partially true for colors, but before I get into that, let's actually break down boosting itself, as I haven't spoken about it a whole lot on this channel prior to this video. I gotta say, for the most part, I enjoy it. It's not always my favorite method of interacting with this franchise, but it works very well for what it is. And despite many fans' delineation between this type of gameplay as opposed to the older adventure games, the DNA of Sonic's core 3D mechanics have remained surprisingly consistent. When the camera is behind Sonic's back, this is basically Sonic Adventure mixed in with some arcade racing mechanics. I liked Adventure as much as I did because they did encourage you to explore a more 3D space with the fluid movement and speed I've come to know and love from the classic Sonic games. But with Adventure 2, they left a lot of the exploration to other characters, while Sonic and, at the time, Shadow focused more on getting from point A to point B as fast as possible. And as the games carried on, doing their own thing on consoles, Dimps had kept the classic gameplay alive and well on handhelds, and would provide a more unique take on it with each passing game, eventually evolving beyond the Sonic Advance trilogy and introduce the boost mechanic with Sonic Rush. And that's just as it sounds. As long as you have a full meter, with a tap of a button, you send Sonic blasting through the level at top speed. And this was incorporated into the mainline Sonic console series and reintroduced as a back-to-basics approach with Sonic Unleashed. But then people didn't like the dog, so they once again called Sonic Colors a back-to-basics approach. That's a term they seem to use a whole lot when it comes to Sonic games. And even if Sonic mechanics had been refined on two different fronts up to that point, Sonic's 3D outings have been narrowed into a funnel, and the boost mechanics, being a proven success on the handheld front, would merge in with that, and it comes together quite well. There are a lot more restrictions on 3D movement and exploration, and I'll be the first to tell you I miss all that meat they cut off with the fat, but in terms of pure speedy Sonic gameplay, the boost formula works. And despite pushback from people saying that this is a boost to win kind of game, there are quite a few restrictions on the boost itself, at least in terms of Sonic Colors. It all comes from white wisps, which can be found sporadically in enemies or in capsules filled to the brim with frothy white wisps just eager to get all up in your eager hedgehog. This does limit how frequently you can boost and has led to a couple of frustrating moments here and there for me, but the point is you need to get familiar with the levels themselves and when to best implement the speed boost. And there are also other elements and mechanics added to put your boosting skills to the test. You have the drift mechanic, which swaps out your boosting for a hard, sharp turn on curvier parts of the course, but I'm not gonna lie, there are a couple of times I've found this to be quite squirrely. Still managed to get the hang of it. I just kinda wish Ultimate would have brought in that tighter turn from Generations, but oh well. There are also sidestep sections, which do make things a little more on rail, but this does feel like a refined version of those horrible high-speed sections of Sonic 06. And there I was at least a fan of the concept, but not so much the execution. So I'm glad they at least utilized it a bit better here as opposed to abandoning it like they've done with so much else with Sonic 06. Quickstep requires quick thinking to make sure you avoid obstacles or enemies. If you can masterfully navigate these sections, you can find the best path through a level or grab an elusive collectible. Considering how limited this mechanic can be, I do think they've come up with some really diverse ways to utilize these sections. That said, I'm not incredibly keen on the quickstep being mapped to a joystick. It's not as responsive as I'd like it to be, and there were more than a couple of times where Sonic just reverted back to standard controls if he slowed down too much. It feels like they're trying to utilize the D-pad on the Wiimote as it makes these sections way more tolerable. Outside of that, you have the stomp, which can take a little getting used to, and pressing it at the wrong time can lead to disaster, but when you are familiar with it, the stomp becomes a very useful tool. It can basically act as an emergency brake to keep your hedgehog from launching off somewhere you might not want him to go, or can be utilized to destroy objects or open new paths, and it's incredibly satisfying to pull that off. There are other things brought in to challenge your boosting abilities, like the occasional step that you have to jump over to avoid. It's more annoying than anything else, but it's an interesting additional challenge that does screw you up and put you in a bit of danger if you're not paying attention. And that's same with the slide, which can get you through lower entrances. Again, nothing major, just a fun little extra something to keep you on your toes while you maneuver through these high-speed sections. I should note the slide is not a new mechanic. It's been around since the Adventure days, and technically the stomp ability probably evolved from the bounce bracelet, which in turn had its origins in the bubble shield all the way back in Sonic 3. This is all here to put your reflexes to the test while barreling through a course as quickly as possible. And these work well as challenges centered around Sonic's boost ability. But even though you have all these newer maneuvers, that doesn't mean they got rid of all the moves previously established in the franchise. Not all of them, anyway. For instance, they brought back the jump. Yeah, can you believe it? But not only that, you also have a double jump that's, well, not much of anything, but it can straighten you out. And of course, you have the homing attack, which has been around ever since Sonic literally had 3D in a game title. And if you're playing Ultimate, you do have the added bonus of a perfectly timed homing attack that adds to your boost meter. I figured this would be something that could be easily abused, but as far as I can tell, it's actually very well balanced and quite rewarding, which is especially nice considering how mindless the homing attack can be become. They do implement it in a couple of interesting ways in the game, like quickly deciding what direction to take while you're in the middle of an asteroid field or avoiding a jelly bean missile, but a lot of the time it just feels like a line of enemies waiting to be mowed down. And on top of that, we have rail grinding making a return as well, much more streamlined than its introduction in Sonic Adventure 2. And I have heard a lot of pushback on this as people do miss the more nuanced control over it, something more akin to Tony Hawk, which clearly inspired the Sonic series back in the early 2000s. I will have to go back and check out those games, but putting it bluntly, I don't mind not having to worry about balancing on top of everything else. I always found the original grinding mechanics to be a bit more of a hassle than I wanted to deal with, but again, this is going off of older memories, so I think it's only fair we tackle those games on their own terms in their own video. But that said, I'm not sure if the original grind mechanics would have fit super well with the boost. Hopping between rails and jumping through trick pipes while dodging spikes is all the challenge I need from this version of the grind. There are a couple more prominent moves you might have noticed have not made their return, that being the ever iconic spin dash and the light speed dash. But don't you worry, they're here, kinda. We'll get into it. In the boost sections, yeah, they did once again strip out a lot of beloved moves from the 3D Sonic games leading to this point, but at the same time, I do understand why, as some of these mechanics might have clashed with what was brought to the table. If Sonic Adventure 2 was taking notes from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, then I'd say the boost era was taking notes from Burnout or Hydro Thunder or any of those arcade racers, honestly. Bombastic, colorful courses filled with ridiculous set pieces that you gotta blast through while at the same time paying attention to your boost, and keeping an eye out for collectibles that are hidden on secret paths that cleverly lay out the most optimal route. It requires a lot of trial and error, but most of the levels are short enough that it's not too much of a headache to jump back in and tackle it over and over again. And eventually you find yourself in a zen-like flow. And I know this is nothing new for Sonic. Classic games have done this. Hell, Sonic R has done this. But it's the boosting that really makes it feel like they really captured that merger between the wild arcade racer and a traditional platformer. Sure, it may be more linear than the adventure games, but at the end of the day, this still feels like a genuine Sonic experience. That is until you get into the actual 2D platforming. There you can just disregard everything we've been talking about for the last few minutes. Okay, that's not entirely fair. I do need to stress, if you are a fan of traditional platformers, you may not have as much of a problem here as I do for some spots. This is still a very competent game. Most of the issues are coming from a hardcore Sonic fan looking for a very specific style of gameplay. And if you're like me and not all about block-based platforming, then this game is gonna feel like you're racing down the highway one moment, but having to slow down and detour through a town every other exit. I'm sure plenty of you have heard the term 2.5D to describe games like Klonoa or Pandemonium, but after playing Sonic Colors, I feel like this game might be the defining example of trying to merge the two dimensions into one game. Truth be told, the 3D sections aren't really all that 3D most of the time. It does open up that Z-axis from time to time, but it's still somewhat limited compared to the adventure titles, and honestly, a lot of the time it's just a few steps removed from Sonic Dash. When it comes to the 2D sections of the game, if you played old school platformers before, you've played this. But unfortunately, a lot of those games probably controlled a little better than Colors. And it's still fine, but Sonic already had a very well defined 2D game style. Sure, Sonic 1 has a lot of traditional platform design, but even then you still have Sonic's physics, and he still feels great regardless of the environment you put him in, even with the first game included. Sonic always felt unique compared to your more traditional platformer, and when I compare Sonic Colors to other traditional platformers, I'm certainly not including classic Sonic gameplay in that mix. Again, it doesn't mean they're bad, but it's hard for someone like me, and apparently a lot of others, who find the shift in level and gameplay design to be somewhat jarring. If you understand the level layout, it's not too much of a shift between the 2D and 3D sections, and you can still keep a decent flow going. There are plenty of spots where you shift between the two quite naturally without ever really needing to realign the way you're playing the game. For the most part, it does work together quite nicely, and if you can get over the fact that you have block-based platforming, you'll still probably have a great time. But if you do have a problem with it, that's going to be a different story. A lot of the time you have to stop dead in your tracks to accomplish some platform puzzle or challenge, and I know that's nothing new for Sonic. My favorite game from the series is Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and there are plenty of platforming challenges there, but you still have to utilize the same momentum, physics, speed, jump, and it all feels great regardless. Again, even with Sonic 1, with all those spots that require you to patiently wait on moving platforms, you're not completely shifting around the way you're using your moveset, or punishing you for hitting a button. Sonic Colors does keep basically the same physics and the same moves, but there were a lot of times where that would actually get me in trouble. While the homing attack and boost feel like essential elements elements of the speedier sections of the game, there are plenty of times it was a massive hindrance, like trying to utilize the double jump to get over a ledge, only to have Sonic lock on an enemy halfway across the screen behind him, or accidentally hitting the boost button and launching off to my death. Still, it's on me in terms of player input to sort all of that out, and the boost did occasionally assist as an air dash in certain spots of the 2D sections if I got a little creative. And I'm sure there are speedrunners that are scoffing at me right now, and I could certainly bring up that same complaint about the stomp ability, but that at least feels like it was better utilized in the 2D sections, with plowing through boxes and stuff of that nature. I think a part of the reason this was such a headache at first is because they flipped button commands around, and I became used to playing colors with the Wiimote nunchuck or the GameCube controller. And say what you will about either controller setup, button layout and feel is so distinct that an accidental button press was rarely ever a problem for anything on those respective systems. Ultimate is where I was having more of a headache, and it was mostly in the opening hours getting used to the game again. So no, it's not entirely the boost button's fault. But the homing attack is another story. Mapping that thing to the same button as that pathetic secondary jump was a bad move. It really should have been one or the other. And while I have railed against homing attacks in 2D Sonic games, it is still somewhat fun to pull off here. So if I had to axe one of the two, I would have gotten rid of the double jump and just make the initial jump a little floatier and get a little more air, like his other 2D outings. I mean, you already have that stomp if you're worried about him getting squirrely in the air. And maybe Sonic jumps the way he does because it mixes well with the boosting. I don't actually know. All I can tell you is that I do not like the way Sonic feels while hopping from platform to platform. He feels heavy, less like a precise floaty jump you'd expect in any other platformer, and more like you're just playing a game of cornhole with every jump you have to make. I can't remember a platformer, especially with a double jump, ever feeling this heavy. On top of that, there is the wall jump ability, and this thing got in my way all the time in the 2D sections. If I wasn't accidentally rocketing over to one side of the screen with an unintentional homing attack, I hit the lip of a platform I was trying to jump on top of, but instead Sonic would launch off the other way. Here I do think Ultimate made it a little easier to perform a wall jump as opposed to the original version. I don't know, again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but my point is that the entire spectrum of the moveset doesn't always work well together. Can you overcome a lot of this with some more mindful button inputs? Absolutely. The game is still easy. Just found myself frustrated a lot of the time in my early hours with the 2D sections. And bluntly, in terms of a basic platformer, it just doesn't feel that great. And the Wisp abilities didn't help matters. Some feel satisfying to pull off, and there are plenty of sections that utilize them quite well. And if you don't want to engage with these things, there are a lot of sections where you don't need to. You can't make it through the entire game without touching the little dudes, but they are more avoidable than you'd expect. And they're not terrible, they're just, well, let's just tackle it one at a time. The first is the laser, a cat's worst enemy. This little dude will shoot Sonic in a straight line. All you gotta do is point him in the right direction. Usually there are diamonds, or I don't know what this is, an exposed cable that you can reflect off of or travel through, and it'll destroy enemies or provide you a shortcut. It's simple, but satisfying, like lining up the perfect shot in a game of billiards. And it's no surprise this was the first power they showed off. And just to make your life a little easier, the screen will darken and highlight your illuminated hedgehog in prominent spots where you can best utilize the ability. Unfortunately, Ultimate decided not to do this. I've even noticed fairly consistently the game will glitch and images will double up, which doesn't make things any easier. Of course, this may potentially be patched, but the darkened laser seems to be consistent across every version of Ultimate I've checked out. Hell, even showed up like this in the trailers. This feels like it's an intentional choice. And even if it isn't, this is just one of the many examples where I feel like Ultimate is draining the color out of Sonic colors. There are other hiccups with other powers, but this again almost feels like an intentional change. At least it would if the credits screen would act the same way, but nope. Full color laser on display. If you guys couldn't get it to work, why did you even bother dimming the lights at all? Good lord. But moving on, you also have the rocket, which will launch you into the air and let Sonic float slowly back down to the level below. Not much to say here. It's cool to pull off the first couple times, and there are certain sections it does feel like a proper shortcut. But after those first couple times, it feels like more trouble than it's worth. Just kind of a waste of time. I didn't feel like waiting for Sonic to drop his ass back down just so I could get back back to the speedy sections. And while floating down is fine from behind Sonic's back, it's less agreeable when the camera remains locked in 2D mode and I have no idea where I might be landing. Not great, especially when the first level this is introduced has plenty of bottomless pits. And we also have the yellow wisp, which will give you the drill ability. You can dig into certain parts of certain levels to access secrets and other parts of the act, all while being constantly bombarded by the most aggressive burrow bots ever seen in this series. You can also use this power to blast through water and make your way through tubes. My problem here just kind of feels aimless. It's kind of ironic that the most explorable sections of the game happen on a 2D front, and it just doesn't work a lot of the time. A lot of the sections are just very open, and you're going to be spending a lot of time just trying to find a spot to recharge your wisp power. Moving on, the blue block ability will make blue blocks tangible or intangible for platforming puzzles. Pretty slow going as you'd expect, and again, it's mostly here to solve a short platforming puzzle so you can access red rings. They can be kind of clever. I don't really think they were introduced in the best place though. Act 1 of Starlight Carnival has you running around in an armada bedazzled with Christmas lights. It feels like the world is expanding now and it's so exhilarating, but actually if you don't mind, we're gonna just pop in the ship for a while and slowly jump on blocks. I've already told you guys how I feel about mixing in blocks with the more circular design Sonic has been known for back in my Minecraft video, and well, strangely that still applies here. There's also Frenzy, which will demolish anything in its path, and by anything I mean specific blocks and glowing tubes. It's also a complete nightmare to maneuver, which I guess is kind of the point, but it doesn't make it any fun to play. And from there we get into a couple more controversial wisp powers, however, which has you slowly float, and unlike Rocket, which has you floating down, you can instead float up. So yeah, it doesn't feel all that special in comparison, which is maybe why they attached the Lightspeed Dash exclusively to this wisp. Same with the Spin Dash and the Spike Wisp. Metroid fans will immediately compare this to the Spider Ball, and fair enough, but unlike the Spider Ball, I sometimes found this somewhat unruly. There were just a lot of instances where the damn thing would be facing the opposite direction of where I wanted it to go, and it just wouldn't respond to my joystick. I think the game just got a little confused depending on what angle the damn thing was sticking. It's manageable, and again, this might be more of a case of player input than anything else, and they do design some clever puzzles around this. These last two powers are largely inoffensive, but what rubs people the wrong way is that they lock standardized Sonic abilities behind aliens. Never bothered me too much as the levels are designed in such a specific way to utilize these abilities. And remember, technically, even the boost is a wisp power in this game. Yeah, forgot to mention the often overlooked but most commonplace White Wisp, which actually provides Sonic his boost in all versions of the game. This ability is one of the core mechanics found in most Sonic games of this era, but here in Sonic Colors, boost is just another wisp ability in all of its speedy, spoogey glory. So doing the same with light speed or spin dash is fine, I guess. Throwing those in as standard moves would have had to have been accounted for while designing the levels of the game. Every ability must be considered for each and every portion, and if they just threw them in willy-nilly without any thought, that could potentially open up a whole new world of problems. So if you can't tell by now, I'm not incredibly taken by the Wisp abilities of this game. They don't really feel like power-ups, just more of a means to solve certain environmental puzzles or access a new path, which can be fine for what this game is doing. Like I keep stressing, there's a good amount of clever level design if you accept the game and mechanics on its own terms, but there are still plenty of times I feel like they are just there to be there and don't lead to much of anything. The drill and floating abilities, a lot of the time, like I said, feel meandering, and that goes against a lot of what I would expect out of a Sonic game, especially one that keeps the high-speed boost as a core mechanic. Again, it falls on me not to hit the boost button and launch myself off a cliff, but the mechanic is always tied to your controller. It's a part of the design, but a massive chunk of this game does not want you to utilize it. People give Unleashed flack for inconsistent game design, and believe you me, I am one of them. I will be one of the first to tell you I do not like the Werehog, but at the very least, the game had the sense to keep the two gameplay styles separated. Colors merges gameplay styles together, and I don't always feel like it blends together quite as nicely as a lot of reviewers would make it out to be. It's competent and can be a lot of fun, but I'm sorry, when they keep stressing this game as a back-to-basics approach, I don't see this as a return to Sonic's basics. It's regressing even further back than the original Sonic game, and copying an embarrassing amount of Mario. And I mean a lot of Mario. Right at the title screen, this feels almost exactly like Mario Galaxy. And hell, Unleashed did this too. Setting in space with a grand, adventurous orchestra. And I know Mario does not own that particular type of music, but orchestral music, like all genres of music, can get far more nuanced than just a big room of people playing fancy instruments. And before you mentioned Sonic 06, I know that had an orchestrated opening, but there is a massive difference between this track as opposed to this track. Mix and match the music between Colors and Galaxy on their respective title screens. You see what I mean? Or hear what I mean? I'm not a music man. I don't know all of the terminology, but the opening for Unleashed and Colors feel like they're trying to hitch their wagons onto Mario's space travels. But that's just the title screen. They're not copying Galaxy gameplay. We'd have to wait for the Wii U game to do that. Look, Mario and Sonic have taken notes from each other before, and Sonic would not exist without Mario. The Galaxy comparisons end after you press start. But even if you think the music stuff is a bit of a stretch, the gameplay is very Mario. It's not Galaxy, but it is still Mario. 2D Mario. I know what some of you are thinking. Of course you're gonna have comparisons to Mario. These examples are superficial, but that's exactly my point. They copied so much Mario without understanding what makes those games so good. A lot of this is surface level at best, and there's a reason why we don't complain about block-based platforming in a Mario game. And that's because of that Nintendo polish. Mario is still the face of gaming for a very good reason. Safe as it may be, Nintendo understands that gameplay matters above everything else. And I mean, Mario isn't above inconsistent quality, but that's only when he's playing board games or getting lazy with the sports. The core games, well, they're a big deal for a reason. 2D and 3D Mario have defined all of gaming, and Nintendo understands that and understands that they don't need to stray too far away from a winning formula. Sure, that gets a little boring for us as gamers who play this stuff obsessively, but, well, they're still great for a good reason. But Sonic Colors physics and mechanics, as I've already explained, they just don't compare to the super tight, super polished gameplay of 2D Mario on its worst day. It's fine, it does the job, but it's just going for a passing grade, which is frustrating because it always feels like it's on the brink of brilliance. And I hate that about Sonic. I hate that even when he's in 3D, Sega seems so incredibly terrified to keep him there. And even now in this game, when they've ditched the fishing, treasure hunting, mechs, and werehogs, even now when they're utilizing so much 2D, something that the Hedgehog should confidently be designed around, instead of seeing classic Sonic gameplay, I instead find Gianna Sisters. And let's not forget this weird-ass multiplayer section. Supposed to be a retro throwback, but why is it utilizing 8-bit music and Legos? It feels like you're celebrating Mario's legacy, not Sonic's. Blocks, 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 and more blocks. I feel like Sonic helped break out of the Mario standard back in the day with that whole ball thing. That's kind of what made him so special. But no, let's bring in more blocks. Hell, let's bring back Minecraft. Happy 30th anniversary, Sonic. Please be more Mario. Please regress into a mold you helped the game industry break out of. Would greatly appreciate it. Okay, that's not entirely true. There are levels in this multiplayer section based off the layouts from Sonic 1, and that is a nice touch. But ironically, all of this makes me feel like Colors learned the wrong lessons from Sonic 1, going so far as to remove all of the elements that made even that original game special. You know, all of the things that the series would embrace going forward, the stuff that would help define Sonic's place in gaming history. I know I'm being super harsh here, but let me just vent a little bit more. The multiplayer bonus sections are not that bad. You can play them by yourself, and red rings will unlock these levels. And if you get through all of them, you get Super Sonic. It's not the most frustrating way to unlock the form, but I don't know, probably the most tedious and lackluster. Again, there is still a lot of Sonic in this game, but Iizuka has flat out said that Colors was designed with Mario fans in mind. That doesn't make it a bad game. I mean, if you're finding inspiration for a platformer, you don't get much better than Mario. But my problem, my bias, like I keep saying over and over again, Sonic already had a very firmly established identity all his own when it comes to 2D basics. If I feel like playing a Mario game, I'm gonna go play a Mario game. And bless your heart, Colors, but none of your 2D sections can even compare. That's why Sonic works in comparison, because you are getting a different experience. Similarities will be there, sure. It is the same genre after all, but again, this is still going to be unique from what you're going to find with Mario. And when Sonic comes so close to replicating the very mascot he was built to compete against, well, I don't think those mechanics work very well with the more Sonic-centric boost. By the time Sonic ended his core trilogy on the Genesis, everything played harmoniously together. Yes, there were stop-and-go challenges, but that was all rolled together with curved ramps, springs, loops, and again, it worked with that big floaty jump and momentum. The spin dash required you to hold down and rev the thing up. I can't think of a single time I ever did one accidentally. And the elemental shields didn't force the entire game to stop to make it pay attention to what stupid powers they were producing. They helped you navigate obstacles already present or add to Sonic's abilities. Double jump, ring magnet, underwater breathing, bouncing, fire burst, protection from projectiles. And of course, all of them would provide an extra hit so you could keep a hold of your precious rings. The Wisps, on the other hand, more often than not feel like you have to drop everything and just focus on some slow section for a while. That's not to say I expect Sonic Colors to be a paint-by-numbers classic Sonic game. I just feel like mechanics need to work in tandem with each other to get the best experience, and I felt that far more often when the game allowed Sonic to be Sonic, and that was mostly in the 3D sections. Wait. Hang on a minute here. Double jump, midair boost, bounces, kind of like a stomp. You even kind of have a ring magnet. Well, not every little thing is one for one, but yeah, just about every other form of movement provided by the elemental shields are just a part of Sonic Colors' standard moveset. One could even argue the classic games can feel like you're going down the highway one moment and slowly driving through a town the next. Hell, they even transition between 2D and 3D gameplay in the classics. There's not only plenty of Mario, there's more classic Sonic here than ever before. So why does this feel more restricted than ever before? Why does this feel so stiff? You'd think someone who grew up on the classic games would adore a Sonic game that had so much 2D gameplay, with all the power of the shields freely at my disposal. But that momentum is gone. Those rolling ball physics that made all the platforming or high-speed sections so much fun, regardless of what you were doing in the level. That's why I keep comparing balls to squares when it comes to Mario and Sonic. That's why Sonic stood out. It wasn't better than Mario. It was different. It was wholly unique. I think that's my actual problem here. Colors seems trapped between those two worlds. And yes, again, it shines a lot, but it never attains masterpiece status. It never overcomes the heights of either series, regardless of the dimension. I know it doesn't sound like it, but there's a lot I honestly like about this game. But I don't love this game. And I love Sonic games. And I love Mario games. I really and truly do. And I hope to talk about how amazing that series is eventually on this channel. And hey, I'm glad everyone on Twitter seems to think that these imaginary corporate mascots are super best buds now. Cool. But that's not the Sonic I grew up with. My Sonic was not made to be buddies with Mario. My Sonic was built to dethrone Mario. He learned from Mario, but he didn't flat out copy him or ride his coattails or pander to his audience. My Sonic was designed to be the next step up from Mario. He was there for the kids that were outgrowing their NESs. He was there to show us what else this genre can be, what else this industry can be. My Sonic taught Mario fear. So when Sega comes back every time with their tails between their legs, promising a return of my Sonic, then I expect a game that stands shoulder to shoulder with the greatest games on the Wii, or the DS, or any system. I expect a game that's gonna be in the middle of plenty of heated arguments between critics when they have to decide their game of the year for their respective websites or magazines. I expect this game to be picked apart and studied in game design courses. I expect a quintessential must-play experience. Are these too high of expectations? Well, sorry, but my Sonic set that standard. And Sonic Colors meets none of them. It crosses the finish line, but it doesn't evolve anything that came before it, and it still drags along plenty of mechanics that feel like they want to be in anything else but a Sonic game. You know what, let's even take 2D Mario out of the equation, and we'll embarrass the Hedgehog with 3D Mario when we talk Lost World. Sonic Colors is good. It's very good. But can any of you honestly tell me that the 3D Sonic elements surpass Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2, Unleashed? Now, I'm not talking mechs or werehogs, I'm talking Sonic gameplay. And yes, I know, Unleashed sprinkled in a lot of basic platforming in their daytime stages. But can you tell me that any of the Colors stages are better than the peak gameplay from Unleashed? Even at the time of its original release, because I'm not comparing this to Generations. Sonic Colors does not surpass the peak gameplay moments of anything that came before it. It's a jack of all trades, master emerald of none.
Agent Stone, the doctor thinks you're basic.
I've had a hard time putting those nitpicks into words for years, and back when it originally launched, I was just happy to have a solid Sonic game where most everybody agreed was a great time. Maybe this just wasn't what I wanted out of the franchise. Maybe I just hadn't spent that much time with it. Maybe I just didn't get the game. But then I played Sonic Colors on the DS. This version, having been developed by Dimps, who made the 2 Rush games prior, made their version feel like a 3rd Rush game. And in turn, Colors DS is often considered a part of the Rush trilogy, as that series never got a proper 3rd entry, but this one still feels very similar to what Dimps had built up prior. And if you are a fan of those games, you're likely going to enjoy this one as well. Not every change might suit your fancy, and I'll admit, it's been far too long since I played Rush 1 and 2 to give you a proper comparison, but the lack of a playable Blaze will be sorely missed by Rush fans. And there are a few personal gripes I have with this game. I've never been a fan of the somewhat flat designs of the environments, and being on such a small screen, it can be a bit of an issue when you not only have to run fast, but boost as well. But that second screen does help mitigate the issue somewhat. Sure, you can't always see everything right in front of you horizontally, but Dimps has definitely improved on their enemy and hazard placements. And of course, you do have a better idea of what's above and below you, and the levels are designed with this in mind. But not only that, the game itself is designed with boost in mind. All the mechanics work well together, all while implementing a lot of moves you're gonna find in the console Big Brother. Actually, let's just get into it here at the beginning, because there are some interesting changes you're gonna notice right off the bat when you compare this to the Wii version. First off, the game starts things with a proper cutscene, showing Sonic and Tails arriving at the theme park. And I get that people prefer jumping right into the action with the console version, and I think that worked very well for Generations, but for Colors, I always found the flashback of the elevator after a couple levels just kinda jarring. I know it's a very minor detail, but I do feel the pacing is just a little better here on the DS version when it comes to the story. I know they have a lot more limitations, but for me, this was the first indication that this version was trying to do things a little bit better than the console version. Sonic and Tails arrive at the theme park the same time the player does, and it helps adjust you to this strange new world in terms of narrative pacing as well as gameplay, as we can see with an optional tutorial. And I appreciate that it's both optional and, well, that there's a tutorial here at all. Because while this does share a lot of similarities with the console version in terms of mechanics, it still plays very differently, and even changes that might seem somewhat arbitrary can probably throw you off if you're expecting a watered down version of the Wii game. because this is definitely not that. There were changes here I genuinely forgot about and was surprised to see after I got done playing Sonic Colors Ultimate and the Wii version, because some of these changes address some of my critiques of the console version. For instance, you don't double jump, you instead do an air dash, which makes more sense because if you did a homing attack without a target, it would look something like that, so that makes sense. Like I keep stressing anytime I ever talk about it, I don't always like homing attacks on a 2D plane. It was brought into the 3D games for a very specific purpose, but all that said, it is implemented fairly cleverly here, rewarding players who react quickly with optional paths that would be somewhat hard to reach otherwise. The wall jump is still here, but it only works on walls with specific patterns, which completely removes accidental jumps that I kept having in the console version. But that's gonna be a double-edged sword depending on what you prefer. The Wii version's wall jump, allowing you to jump anywhere, means you can get creative with it, but the DS version means you can only use it in very specific spots. They place it sporadically, sometimes being an extra boost just to get you up a corridor if you fall a little short, and sometimes it's its own unique platforming challenge by placing spikes in certain spots, forcing you to land those jumps very carefully. Both have their pros and cons, but I prefer the implementation of the DS version. And this game also has the spin dash. Okay. Look, you're probably not going to use it a whole lot, but I still have used it occasionally. And I just appreciate a Sonic game allowing for rolling in general. I think it's so weird that the Wii version doesn't have that. And I'm sure speedrunners can get very creative with this. You can boost into a spin dash or spin dash into a boost, and it's rad. And if you run out of boost, it's just nice to have here. It's also nice to have the original rev up and jump noises. I love that. I also love that this version further emphasizes that the boost is a Wisp power for colors. Sonic doesn't even start the game with this ability. You have to go through all of Act 1 of Tropical Resort without it. This lets you appreciate a more standard Sonic moveset when you can't rely on the boost, and you get to appreciate the boost that much more when you're finally allowed to use all of its spoogey white Wisp glory. The levels are designed with Sonic in mind, as opposed to feeling like it's plopping Sonic into someone else's game. It's an absolute thrill to play through. Even the Wisps feel better here. You don't have to awkwardly stop everything you're doing. For the most part, the abilities keep the hedgehog moving. And this version of the game does have its own unique flavor of Wisps as well. You have the burst ability, which will turn you into a fireball that you can charge up and launch off in any direction you feel like, helping you clear out dangerous bombs, which in turn will help you move forward or activate some fun level gimmicks. You also have the void ability, which is a little slower, but is far more satisfying to maneuver and destroy things when compared to Frenzy. You may also notice that some Wisp powers did not make it over to this version of the game, such as the hover or the block Wisp. It's almost as if the mechanics and level design would not have meshed super well with blocks. Oh darn, what a shame. The rocket still has you launch up into the air and slowly float down, but again, I think it's better utilized here, like having to get enough momentum to launch up in the air, homing attack a line of enemies, pick up the rocket, and then activate it in that same spot before you drop back down to the earth below. They keep you moving forward, and you have to react quickly while you pick up the Wisps. Oh god, and the drill! I will admit it is still a bit of a pain in the ass. They do constrict you quite a bit while having you get chased down by some big machines, which is a cool idea. I just needed a little bit more work. But if nothing else, I do appreciate the thematic consistency. It shows up on Planet Wisp, where all the construction is happening. That makes way more sense than the console version. That said, the map layout is largely similar to the console counterpart, but they have a clear distinction between acts and missions. Unlike the console game where everything is called an act, regardless of how long or short the level can be, the DS version made an obvious change with its more standard acts and these smaller, more focused missions. These also provide fun cameos for most of Sonic's cast. And yeah, they're mostly just still images, but it still adds a bit of character to this surprisingly empty world. And the DS map also gives you hints as to what you should be expecting in the acts themselves. What's that dinosaur corpse up to? Better go find out. I do think the console overworlds are a lot of fun in their own right, with plenty of detailed animation that's just fun to soak in, but there's nothing here indicating what these levels are all about, which kind of is the function of most other overworlds. The red rings here also represent the priority of each of the respective versions. A lot of the time, I feel like the DS red rings are placed in spots that will guide you through the optimal and usually most challenging route through a level, making you be as fast and efficient as possible with Wisp and Boost abilities. The console version has plenty of rings that feel similar to that, but a lot of the time you're gonna have to stop everything just to track one down or figure out a platforming puzzle. And obviously, since you have special stages separate from the red rings, those don't unlock Supersonic. They instead unlock concept art, which is nice. I don't know why that wasn't on the console version, but whatever, they're here. I also gotta say, I much prefer the multiplayer of the DS version. They don't have a bunch of levels set aside and built specifically for it like the console version. You have to play through the acts as they are, but again, these are just designed to move you through as quickly as possible, so they make for great race courses against an opponent. And they give you abilities to help you slow your opponent down, or in turn for you to dodge from your opponent. And they actually provided you a lot of ways to interact with other players. Multi-cart play, single cart play, local connection, Wi-Fi. Hell, if you wanted to just go solo, you can race an AI. And on top of all this, you get a time attack mode. None of this is mind-blowing, and it was also kind of standard, but these are still fun little extras to help get extended playtime from your game. And if that wasn't enough, there are special stages. Not this tedious block nonsense, just a good old-fashioned half-pipe, which, yeah, I know that's a bit overplayed, but I'd say it's utilized best here, because they have you use the touchscreen. You just pick up balls of a certain color like Sonic Heroes, but the touchpad is super responsive. Sonic is just as quick as your stylus, and I actually had a lot of fun going through these things. And while I can't unlock Supersonic for the core levels, which does suck, you do at least get a true final boss, which I did appreciate. And it's against the Mother Wisp. Huh. Look, I know the Mother Wisp is a weird design, and this does feel like it kind of comes out of nowhere, but they do allude to it in the cutscenes, and yeah, there are a lot of spots in these quick cutscenes that seem to play up some fun concepts, including the corrupted Mother Wisp and the Nega Wisps being crazed, vicious versions of the standard variety. I should note that the actual final fight is extremely tedious, but I do love the idea. I really wish the console version played with this a bit more. Sure, we do have an unlockable Supersonic, and I'm happy about that, but I don't know, man. Secret final bosses are a lot of fun. And speaking of the DS version, I even like the way they have you interact with each new Wisp in a cutscene that has you utilize the touchscreen. I don't generally like the Wisps, but at least the handheld version is making a big deal about unlocking a new ability, as opposed to just starting level and just running into it like the console version does. It's just crazy because all the lacking elements I found about the Wii edition seem to be made up for in the DS edition. This game sets Sonic the Hedgehog loose onto a theme park. How do you not go wild with that idea? There are a lot of great spots in the console version, but it also feels like it added all the long wait lines you'd find in real amusement parks. And when they baby it up as much as they do here, it makes me think this game doesn't think its players are tall enough to get on the rides. All of that said, though, I don't know if I would choose DS colors over console colors. While it does a lot of stuff the console version doesn't do, it really only shines in relation to the Wii counterpart. I couldn't even really call this the best Rush game. I'd just call it another Rush game. And while the console game is a bit too stiff and slow and Mario-y, this game goes into the other extreme. Rarely does it ever actually try to be a platformer, and you can thank the boost for that and wait for another video before we really pick that apart. And the few times it does force you to slow down, well, you ride a glowing whale. DS is fine if you are familiar with the Rush formula, or maybe handheld dimp Sonic in general, but looking at this from the perspective of someone who maybe has never even picked up a controller before, well, I think the Wii version makes a better first impression. I've seen a lot of people talking about the original Colors game like it was this obscure game that nobody had the chance to play. It stayed on just one console before it got ported to Ultimate, and yeah, that can't be denied. You can't really play it on other hardware outside of the Wii, but it was sold on the Wii, and it sold just about as well as Unleashed on less platforms. This is far from lost media, and ironically enough, being exclusive to Nintendo probably gave the game its best possible chance to succeed. And you might be asking, what exactly does that have to do with anything? Well, as much as I want Sonic to be this one specific thing, or how many other ideas were not utilized, or what came out after, I think it's it's important to understand the intent of the game itself and judge it on those merits, or at least put them into consideration. I've spent an obnoxious amount of time complaining and comparing this to Mario, and I do understand how ridiculous that sounds. That's like The Simpsons did it of video games. Comparing anything to Mario is just a moot point. Mario probably did it first. But I do again think there was a lot of intentional Mario choices made when making Sonic Colors. Again, Azuka said as much. And that's actually kind of brilliant. Sure, there is a lot of basic 2D platforming, but it makes the boost sections that much more appealing. And having all those gameplay elements mixed together in the same levels, that's a great way to get a kid who may have only ever known Mario games up to that point a little more accustomed to Sonic gameplay. That's literally what Sonic 1 did. And back in 2010, just like 1991, Sega would have been out of their minds not to tempt some Mario kids over to the blue side. And yes, I know there were a lot of great ideas left on the table with the adventure era, but the brand was not doing too hot back then. Each game was getting more and more panned with each release, and 06 was the breaking point, not just for gaming press, but for longtime fans, and for Sonic Team themselves. And the aftermath was so widespread that it went and affected the goodwill that Unleashed could have had. It's an undeniable improvement from 06 in terms of gameplay, and yes, I know a lot of people are coming out now and talking about how fun the game can actually be, but back then, if Sonic put one single red shoe out of line, there would be hell to pay. And seeing this giant, stretchy, slow variation was enough for me, and apparently a lot of others, to announce the game dead on arrival. Sega had to play it safe with their next title, and even that requires an extreme amount of precision. And having Dimps and Sonic Team just focus up on one console each, and very underpowered ones, was the smartest move to make, especially considering the consoles they were releasing on. As underpowered as they were, it cannot be understated just how well Nintendo's two game machines were doing at the time. As hard as it is right now in the year 2021 to find a PS5 or Series X, it was just as hard, if not more so, to track down a Nintendo Wii. And even then, it was hard to track down specific titles. Mario titles. Not so much Galaxy, Mario Kart certainly, but also
Super Mario Brothers. Whee!
a back-to-basics Mario game that was just doing crazy numbers. And Sega was not releasing a Sonic game for a Sega system to a Sega audience. They were releasing it on Nintendo hardware when Nintendo was at their absolute prime. Stronger than when Sega themselves fought them. The Switch might overtake one of them eventually, but as of right now, the Wii is still the best-selling Nintendo console ever, and the DS is still their best-selling handheld console ever. So yes, trying to attract the Mario crowd just made sense. And while the next game released on different hardware than the Wii, it sure got kids primed and ready for an even more refined boost game that celebrated the entire legacy of Sonic. That at the very least gives me some sense of appreciation. There's a larger conversation to be had, especially with hindsight and with Lost World and everything else under the belt, but just considering what this game was trying to do and who they were trying to appeal to, I think it did the job quite well. And not only that, despite my own complaints, there's actually a lot I love about this game. I don't go back and replay it all the time, but that aside, some of my favorite music tracks, gaming moments, setting, some of my favorite stuff from any part of the Sonic franchise is found right here in this game. Despite my complaints about the 2D sections of the Wii edition, like I keep saying, they did put in a lot of clever level design. Even the puzzle rooms have a flow about them, and it's satisfying to figure out. Sometimes it's okay to slow down for a second. I do think they went a bit too far in that regard, but a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference, as opposed to being actual flaws in the game design. I do like the DS game focusing more on Sonic's speed and keeping a consistent style of gameplay, but if I'm honest, it does drain on me a little bit. And look, I'm sorry, but spectacle matters when it comes to these games. The setting is wildly inventive and the soundtrack follows suit. The art direction is top-notch in colors, and there's this magical blend between the environments and the beats you'd hear while racing through them. There's always a lead-in with the music introducing you to the level with the loading screen before it drops that energetic melody as Sonic gets moving. And while I like to complain about the cutscenes, if you remove them, you'd probably have a solid understanding of what's going on in the narrative, a strength of the classic Sonic games at their full potential. And it's a shame the cutscenes take so much of the attention because what's being told in the melody of each track, and in the settings, set pieces, backgrounds, layout, hazards, enemies, and boss battles can truly be engaging. Simple, sure, but where the words fall short in the narrative, everything else shines. The game starts at the tropical resort, completely different from your more natural settings Sonic games usually start in, but still tonally fitting as a starting area. This is where you arrive at the park. This is the Disneyland Main Street. This is where you shop. This is where you check into your hotel. This is the central hub where the rest of the park branches out. It's warm, welcoming, and celebratory. You practice homing attacks on balloon clusters. Even egg ponds are waving around welcome signs. All this while giving you a gorgeous view of the world below and teasing powers yet to be unlocked, inviting you to come back to the resort from time to time. And they'll do this for the rest of the game as you unlock Wisp powers. This game felt like a vacation from all the dreary drama surrounding this franchise. It makes you excited to see what other attractions await. And even if it's not Green Hill, even without all the natural vegetation, the theme is just as inviting, riding the waves of that surf rock guitar, all leading to that explosive party. And this gets remixed in different ways for each act going forward, and that's the case for every level. But like every other level, the first act's music is usually the strongest of the compositions. The next world from there is Sweet Mountain, and I don't care what anyone says, running around giant junk food is awesome. I absolutely love when the games get creative with level themes while staying consistent with the overall game setting. What kind of amusement park lacks concessions? This isn't a standard rinky-dink theme park, this is in space and they're gonna get ridiculous with it. Donuts, lollipops, hamburgers, popcorn actually popping as you roll through them, drifting through giant gingerbread men like you're a sore loser who just lost a game of Candyland. Willy Wonka can stuff his golden ticket. I'll die of diabetes at the peak of Sweet Mountain. As for the music, I don't know if it really tonally fits, but it's loud, it's bombastic, and it is unique on its own. I know exactly what that theme is the moment it starts playing. And there is still this artificial element to all of the environment if you look a little bit closely at the giant food on display. You'll see screws and panels showing that this isn't actually giant food all the time, and you do see some factory process going on here. And for some reason, jelly beans are being stored into missiles. Is this just an easier means to transport them around the park, or is this alluding to some candy-themed warfare? Wouldn't put it past Eggman. This is the same dude who had a fish-themed fleet. And speaking of fleets, up next is the Starlight Carnival, and despite some platforming tedium I've already talked about, the set pieces of this world are something special. Having Sonic run around a giant light parade, something that's usually bound to streets, is now blown up in the limitless expanse of outer space. But as you make your way through some of the innards of these ships, there seems to be something more sinister going on once you get past the bright lights. And later on in the first act, we see countless ships warp into uniform place. As you progress through the level, it looks less like a parade and more like an armada prepped for war. As big as the ideas of a theme park get in space, so too are the military capabilities of Eggman. And this level is showing us just how dangerous things can potentially get if Sonic doesn't put a stop to this carnival. And following all that up is Planet Wisp, and I'm sure plenty of you who originally checked colors out back in the day might remember the opening moments of this world just as prominently, if not more so, than Tropical Resort. This is the turning point in our wordless narrative, where we push past all the bright lights, treats, and rides, and reveal something wonderful and horrible all at the same time. And that piano, while being another lead-in to an energetic track, has this beautiful sadness to it that isn't present in any other part of the soundtrack leading up to this point. The title scene cuts away, revealing a field of untamed grass, and as soon as Sonic is done stretching, he takes off. That sad piano now joined on stage by a more positive, energetic melody, something to get the player moving and motivated as the natural world is quickly stripped away by Eggman's construction. And you do hear thematic elements of that as well in the music as that carries on as well. We are halfway through the game and only now are we seeing your standard forested green level you'd expect at the start of most Sonic games, placed in the middle, but still actually showing the same role, just all in one go, showing you the true, terrible cost of this ridiculous park. And like the music track, the level themes clash to create something unique. You're not actually on any part of the theme park for this area, and part part of me always thought it was a little bit weird that they didn't show the theme park for Sonic Generations and instead showed off Planet Wisp, but considering the importance in the story and the kind of impact it left on us, I can understand why they went with that instead of anything else. Aquatic Park is a return to the park, and truth be told, there's not much new being added to the narrative itself. This is yet another attraction, which could be seen as something of a water park or a high-end sushi restaurant. Maybe a little mix of both. Regardless, this is a unique take on a water level, both with the setting, the more traditional Japanese theme infused with water hazards, as well as a new way for Sonic to traverse water. He can still slow down, but you actually can move him through the stuff by constantly jumping. You still have water bubbles, but also protective fish who can keep you from drowning. I already went over my general thoughts on the more open spaces with the drill, but it is kind of nice to have a different way to interact with this very notorious element of the franchise. Then we get to the final planetoid, Asteroid Coaster, and this one just looks straight up sinister, but I love how it's almost intentional. Like Eggman knew it was always going to look bad, so he just played into it. This looks dangerous, so of course, that's where you put the most thrilling rides. And I gotta say, at least for the main acts, the level layouts feel so clever. Again, mostly in the spots where Sonic is allowed to just be Sonic. I had so much fun jumping between roller coasters, homing to attack asteroids, zipping around planet rings. They totally missed a great spot for a Sega Saturn reference, but whatever. This area is exhilarating, and while all this is happening, the game is continuing its narrative. This is the horrible outcome of Eggman's abuse of the Wisps, turning them into Nega Wisps. This is where we're introduced to the barely controllable frenzy, and it all makes for a great last level, all while fitting with the theme of being an amusement park. Then of course you have Terminal Velocity, which is a great set for escaping this craziness as it's blowing up, and the final boss itself. And maybe we don't have a final supersonic fight, but this still fits quite thematically with everything else going on here, and it's very satisfying to help Wisps escape and then have them all combined to take Eggman out once and for all. And that's not all I have to say about these level themes. It only now dawns on me after doing research for this video that there's a lot of Sonic 1 in these designs. And I'm not talking about the level layouts from the multiplayer stages, though those are very lovely references. I mean the themes themselves. Look at this concept art for Green Hill Zone. It's basically Tropical Resort. And if you think about it, the beta build had UFOs in the sky of Marble Garden, and if you look at the concept art for Marble Garden, it's got these strange tiles just floating in the air, kind of like the ones you saw from Starlight Carnival. Oh, and actually, when you think about that name, we do have Starlight Zone, and good lord, look at that art. A water theme level with a lot of Japanese elements, and this is just what I could find on Sonic Retro. I can't even imagine what else we might be missing out on, and I sincerely doubt this is a coincidence. There's just a lot of parallels here. Isn't it funny? As much as I harped on Sonic Colors being a clone of a Mario game, it turns out this very same game stays truer to the original concepts of Sonic than even Sonic 1 did. Just, God, this game. When it comes right down to it, some of my biggest problems with the game is how limited I feel with interacting with these worlds, and again, even with the shorter 2D levels, there is a lot of interesting stuff happening here. Like, I know a lot of people found that burger level frustrating, but all you do is circle around this one giant patty, and if you're paying close enough attention to the drill tubes and grind rails, you can actually figure out a path before you even get to those sections. That's thinking in 2.5D. I know Dip started the boost stuff, and they did a great job, but I think I just like how it feels a little bit more in 3D. I like seeing what's ahead of me, and I love looking at everything happening around me. The DS game, as focused as it can be, can provide that level of experience. Yes, running from a Ferris wheel is exhilarating, or T-Rex skulls. Does that mean they're alien dinosaurs? Whatever. But then you get hang gliding, which, I mean, that's nice. And the bosses really aren't anything to write home about on either version of the game. But for the DS version, you mostly have standard running around a ring like other Rush games, and I'm sorry Sonic, Klonoa already did that way better. They also try to emulate the console versions, but that doesn't really leave much of an impact. And while I like the idea of the Mother Wisp fight, it takes way too damn long and it's not remotely exciting. If you make a supersonic fight boring, you've screwed up somewhere. I do at least like the Nega Wisp armor incorporating Wisp powers, but if I had to choose between the console or DS version, the console version was way more fun. I found it genuinely challenging at first. It required that I put everything I had learned to the test and utilized and even combined Wisp powers in clever ways. It was only after that last boss fight that I actually feel okay with the other bosses not incorporating Wisp powers. But like I said up front, the other boss fights aren't off the hook. Between the two versions, console ones are much cooler, in concept at least. And that is my biggest problem with them. I don't get to spend enough time with these crazy crazy designs. That, and I do feel the circular boss fights would have worked much better with classic Sonic mechanics. I love the Ferris wheel design of Tropical Resort. It's loud, it's bombastic, it's super intimidating, and it looks like it's gonna require a lot of thinking to figure out how to tackle this thing, but if you have the Laser Wisp, it's done in 2 hits. That's it. That's nothing. The size, the design of the arena, the threatening, awesome machine noise scream, and it's all over before it began. These boss fights look so cool, but it just doesn't do enough, which I guess I could say about Colors as a whole. I kind of trailed off my main point, but if you're wondering which is better between the Wii or DS version, I think the Wii will probably have the better overall experience, but the DS edition feels like it's doing all it can with the little it has to work with. I suppose it's nice that it's not just a lesser version of the console edition. It really does feel like it's trying to correct some design choices of its bigger brother. And while it doesn't look as nice, it does focus up on where it counts and provides a largely consistent gameplay experience. They provide something worthwhile that the other doesn't. And for that, I do think both deserve to be experienced. I'll put it this way, if Dimps was allowed to make the Wii version of the game with some Sonic Team supervision, that might have been the ultimate version of this game. But silly me, the ultimate version of Sonic Colors does exist, doesn't it? At least that's what they say in the name. By now, anyone in the Sonic fanbase has probably heard every opinion under the sun about this game. And every time I've streamed this thing, I always get people asking me if I've run into glitches or if it's worth the asking price. And across 4 versions of this game, PC, Switch, PS4, and Xbox. Wasn't gonna get the Xbox version, but I lost my keychain for the Switch version, and I really wanted to make that keychain joke both before and after a large chunk of patches. I can tell you that I really didn't run into a lot of glitches, but I did run into them all the same. Some of your classics, like the pop-in, or music dropping randomly, or textures loading in whenever they fancy, or Sonic floating into a level, a game crash here and there. Alright, this was the part that kept glitching out on me. Let's see if this got fixed. Oh shit, there we go. There you go.
That's the shit I signed up for.
And there you have it. Yeah, all of this stuff happened, and it was noticeable and distracting, or flat out unplayable. Thankfully, I never ran into the more notorious ones like seizure-inducing glitches, or corrupting save files, or any of those other big bad problems that others have reported. Still, the fact that they are here at all is a massive, massive problem. Crisis City is fun, not gonna lie. Well, yeah, you guys enjoy what you want.
I've always been the you could do whatever you want, like just don't push on me. Is that the bad kind of thing? Because I'm not like
it's not bad. I know that like there's a YouTuber that I watch, Philosophy Tube, who considers that your dadism, but I mean it's not a bad thing. It's certainly harmless.
What happened to my game? I wish I could say I was remotely surprised at the backlash we've seen from this game, but there's been a lot of arguing since trailer 1. Why is everything so dark? Oh, don't worry, they're just showing off earlier builds because, you know, that makes sense. That's what vertical slices are known to do. Don't worry, assets have leaked online, it's actually beautiful. No, wait, no, a new trailer's out, it's garbage. And even when it's actually out, we can't tell what glitches are real or made up through an emulator. And the worst version of the game seemed to swap places every hour, but I think it finally settled on the Switch, but each of them have their problems. There we go. And yep.
Oh, do you still get the drop?
In every single version. We can now confirm every single version still has this. Wowie, wow, wow. Just
Wow, what was he?
Wow, wow, Weezer.
But despite the vitriol inspired by Ultimate, it's still getting great review scores. We seem to be in a Last Jedi situation where critics are just adoring this thing, while a lot of the hardcore Sonic fan base is, quite frankly, livid. Could just never be on the same page, can we, journalists?
Ah, shit. I mean, I think,
I think we crossed right past each other like ships in the night,
We
man.
flip-flopped.
Yeah, because we're on the opposite side now. That side makes no more sense. We could have just met up like 2 hours ago.
Sonic fans are known to throw a fit over these reviews, however they go. If you've seen my chum channel Pups videos or heard us on Sunset City, you know a lot of these review sites still fall back on the same tired talking points of 3D Sonic. I know a lot of you are sick of reviewers dragging up the corpse of Sonic 06, but I can't help but feel that's somewhat warranted when absolutely everything people were concerned about going wrong went wrong. But ironically, they don't seem to be bringing up 06 in relation to all the glitches that Colors Ultimate seems to have. They just talk about the importance of Colors in relation to when it was released when compared to the rest of the franchise. And I genuinely do not know how some of these larger outlets completely pass them by. Are we just this accustomed to glitchy games at launch? Sonic 06 wasn't broken, it was just ahead of its time. Despite whatever problems you may have with your standard IGN review, a lot of these guys hit the basic points that actually matter for the general consumer. And when it boils right down to it, most people are probably going to have a good time with Sonic Colors Ultimate. But I'm not your general consumer. I am a hardcore Sonic fan, one who has been around for all 30 years of the Hedgehog's existence. I'm not happy with this game. I have been in a lot of spots while playing this, don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, most of that enjoyment was already present in the original Wii release. Ultimate is a shoddy house built on a solid foundation, and I hate that I'm not even surprised at this point. I'm not even surprised that Sega fell below my already low expectations. What I expected was the bare minimum, up-resed and upscaled, slapped onto a disc and put on sale. Mama Bird Sega is just regurgitating an old meal into the screeching gullets of an impatient fan base of baby birds. And that was kind of the point of this release, wasn't it? A safe, easy product that was well regarded, and it gives the fans something to buy. All they should have done is shine this up for HD, add some simple quality of life improvements found in Generations, and slap Colors and Generations and Unleashed into a Boost trilogy. If this was supposed to be an easy release, there were easier ways to go about this. Sonic fans just want their damn games back. That's it. They want to play them and preserve them on new hardware. And if this was just here as a stopgap, then that's all this should have been. Nintendo is already proving problematic with their re-releases, and all Sega is doing with this is just lowering that standard even further, when sadly, I know less effort was put into 3D All-Stars and Skyward Sword. The biggest problem of this game should have been its price point. Right next to those Nintendo games this thing so desperately tried to emulate. But even then, Sega had to release something worse than what Nintendo has been doing for the past year. Something worse than a $60 price tag. Something worse than artificial scarcity. If your remaster comes out and you cannot definitively call this the best version of the game, if you need Digital Foundry to compare what's changed in the textures, then you've screwed up pretty royally. Yes, I am going to whine about things you've already heard about. I don't hate the lowered lights in Tropical Resort. I think they look kind of nice. I just don't know why they didn't bother messing with the lights from level to level. Like, make it sometimes look a little bit more like the original version of the game, and sometimes lower the lights a little bit. I don't think that's asking for too much, and it's very jarring when you compare it to the AI upscaled cutscenes, which feature all the original lighting and textures. Good job on that upscaling, by the way. Feels like I'm watching a 3D movie without the glasses. Don't even get me started on that small screen in the options menu. But back to the graphics, I'm sorry, the bloom is too much. Good God, Starlight Carnival. It looks like an insecure teenager's profile picture. And why does Sonic look like a bootleg nightlight? Thanks, Obama. And then there's load times. Clearly another optimization issue on full display. And I'm sure a lot of you noticed how long it took for some levels to start, partially thanks to the music. Like I talked about earlier, there was this harmony between the environment and the music, and it felt like they built up through the level's title, Sonic stretching, and when he actually took off. The track synced up so well with the original game that it felt like there were musical cues to let the player know when the loading was finished, when Sonic would begin running. And hell, this may be coincidental, but on levels where you're actually playing pretty perfectly, the music flowed along with you. This made you feel like you were part of the band, and the controller was your instrument. With Ultimate slower loading times, it makes you feel like you're missing your mark. It feels like a video stream with a visual delay, and everything just kind of feels off as you start the level. The music already ramping up before you've even started running. And of course, let's not forget that embarrassing silence and the hilariously long credits. I've only heard about them, I wouldn't know myself, because my game crashed during the credits. Alright, look at that. Alright, so we do have a positive change. Nick can finally say he beat this stupid game thanks to the patch. Music can be hit and miss, and I know a lot of it's subjective, but let's just call it like it is. June rocks the living crap out of some of these remixes. Terminal Velocity feels even more like a proper endgame challenge thanks to his music. Asteroid Coaster now feels like it was pulled straight out of Sonic Adventure 2. The Ferris wheel fight is now even more undeservedly epic. But then you also have this EDM shit, which is just obnoxious. Some of it slaps on its own, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it sounds unfinished. Feels like I'm halfway through one of Carpathia's deconstructed Sonic tracks. And if you don't get that reference, go check out their channel. It is so ridiculously satisfying. It'll also make my joke funny with context. And yes, of course, the infamous Planet Wisp track. The thematic turning point in the narrative of Sonic Colors, when you get past all the bright lights and theme park rides and see the sad natural beauty being torn apart. Yeah, all that's replaced with a rave. Funnily enough, though, you get the original track if you didn't bother with the pre-order bonus. It's kind of like Sega didn't really think too much about this at all. Kind of feels like Sega was just putting extra crap in here just to convince you to pre-order the game before all these reviews could come out. The remixes are just a confusing mix. Some tracks feel like a genuine improvement, but a lot of it feels unfinished or half-hearted. Change for the sake of being changed, and others completely missing the point of the original tracks. And you say that about everything in this product. Medallions were added to the game, which in turn can be used to unlock some fun little texture swaps for Sonic's shoes, gloves, and running, and these character emblems that I promise you will forget about. The tail save in concept is a solid idea, but the implementation clearly leaves a lot to be desired. They were so determined to make this a selling point and revolutionize the life system, and it just ended up creating new problems. For example, there was this one time I fell into some green goo because the frenzy sucks, and I died and got sent back to a checkpoint, but another time it activated the tail save. So okay, maybe it's not just for bottomless pits, or maybe the goo is considered a bottomless pit. I genuinely don't know what the parameters are here. Why does he take so long to drop you down? Were they just that proud to have a Tails model in the game? You remember all that speculation we had when we first saw his stupid floating head in a screenshot? Thought there might be a playable Tails. Gosh, how ridiculous we were being. I know a lot of people say that life systems don't matter anymore, but just because it's not as severe with its punishment like it could be back in the NES days, doesn't mean it doesn't have a place. In the original release, the lives would get you back to checkpoints, and if you lost all your lives, you got kicked out of the level. It's simple, it's not too punishing, but it does the job just fine. And every 100 rings will get you an extra life, giving you great incentive to collect rings. But with the Tails save, oh, they make you temporarily invincible, just solving a problem that didn't need to be solved. When did anybody use that invincibility? Why are they so obsessed with making this easy game even easier? And shout out to King K for pointing out that you can actually exploit this thing by grabbing red rings over and over again, and to Chowmix for pointing out that if you just wanted to restart at a checkpoint in case you missed a red ring, the Tails save will occasionally lock you out of that option. These are not things you would probably notice in a single playthrough without attempting to 100% the game. And probably not something you would have noticed if you had to quickly put a review together just to make sure you could get this published the moment an embargo lifts. But this is the kind of stuff that hardcore Sonic fans will notice. So thank you, gents, and to everybody else who've been analyzing this game for paying attention to the smaller details. And if you haven't seen either of their videos yet, links are in the description. And if you have seen them, go watch them again. If you can play through Sonic Colors twice, you can watch a YouTube video twice. But moving on from there, the Ghost Wisp is an embarrassing attempt to add replay value by moving around some red rings. And it's somehow even less engaging than my least favorite Wisp powers from the original. And it does what no Sonic remaster should ever do. It makes the game slower. It's not fun, it's not creative, and it only reminds me of how much more fun I had with the Pulsars from Mario Galaxy. And I didn't even find those things super fun to begin with. Let's move on to the Rival Rush mode. Good lord, what a letdown. The premise is it's fine. It's just a challenging time trial mode. And maybe if I didn't pay attention to the pathetic marketing campaign of this game, I wouldn't have expected so much. But I don't think I was expecting that much to begin with. There's just 6 courses here. Some aren't even on the main acts. Like, why even bother? See, my thinking was, the ranking system in Sonic Colors took me a while to get my head around because it incorporates rings, Wisp usage, red ring collection, and when you incorporate all of that, the actual time it took you through the level doesn't matter that much. So I thought, at the very least, they would take a page from Crash Bandicoot and offer an extra reward for all the stages by focusing solely on how fast you make your way through it. That makes sense for a character like Sonic. And yes, they kinda do that. It's just for 6 levels though. Why go to all the trouble of producing a cartoon that features better writing than the original game and teases some really cool ideas that you could incorporate into the game? A Wisp capsule infused Metal Sonic? Are you kidding me? That looks amazing. Also, splitting the cartoon in 2 made even less sense than splitting Sonic 3 in half. These guys were really that desperate to spread out content for everything in this game, weren't they? Good lord. How cool would it have been to have a secret Metal Sonic fight, or have him incorporate Wisps into the race itself? You already have a final boss with this template, just mix it around a bit. Or you could remix levels themselves, move around set pieces, or make the game a little bit more challenging, make a proper hard mode. The tail save should have been incorporated into a new easy mode, and Metal should have been incorporated into a hard mode, both optional to play. I mean, give Metal Sonic something else to do. Give him a couple of attacks. I mean, how cool would it have been to have every level in the game feel like the Sonic CD race? Or hey, why not have a split screen or online mode where you play Sonic and another player gets to use Metal? Make it a proper rival rush. You already kind of have something going on with this weird multiplayer mode. Why not expand upon it? And Channel Pump pointed this out while we were talking. Metal Sonic and Tails Doll absolutely should have been playable in that mode. Give us something for getting rid of the Miis. And obviously, if nothing else, as everybody else has already pointed out, they should have made Metal Sonic an unlockable after beating all the rival rushes. There's just a lot of good ideas here. Even if they just took Rival Rush and incorporated it into more levels, that still would have been a step up from what we got here. Some of these ideas might be a bit too much. All of them require some more effort, but this game deserves it. And what's worse, a lot of these ideas are already available in the DS game. Time trial? Check. Battle race mode? Check. Multiplayer? Check, check, check. All available for every act of the game. I mean, sure, you don't get to play with or against Metal Sonic, and that sucks, but this is just so frustrating because Ultimate had every opportunity to learn from the mistakes of the original Wii release and potentially bring in some cooler ideas from the DS game. Instead, we just get all these half-hearted attempts. Rival Rush aside, you could do some bare minimum quality of life improvements. Make the shorter acts distinct on the overworld map. Give us some boost in that awkwardly slow opening to Starlight Carnival Act 1, or that weird backwards movement when you get shot up by that lift. There's also something that's been driving me a little bit crazy when it comes to saving progress and level replays. Sometimes the game would acknowledge I'd pick up new red rings or manage an S rank and it would all save just fine, but occasionally when I would hop back into the overworld map, it would act like I had done absolutely nothing, and I would find my hard-earned red rings still grayed out and my letter grade still the same as it ever was, even though I spent all that extra time after class working on that extra credit. So I thought that the game wouldn't save the progress if I restarted a run, even if I hit the goal line. But no, if I did replay from the goal line, all my newly acquired red rings would still be there, safe and sound. But if I had decided at that point that I'm good with what I had and paused the game and exited the level, nothing would be saved. And as it turns out, I needed to either leave the level after that initial successful run at the goal screen, or if I had hit the replay option, I would have to go through the entire level yet again and then get to the goal screen and then exit the stage. It's only there that the game will save your progress. This sounds somewhat nitpicky, I understand, but if you are somebody who is clearing up red rings and trying to master the course to the point you get the coveted S rank, you're likely going to be replaying the level quite a few times, and also likely you will accidentally hit the button that instigates a repeat run instead of exiting. That'll just be out of habit from redoing courses over and over again, just to better that score or ring count. Just save my damn progress there at the goal line, regardless of whether or not I replay the level or leave. The only reason I can think of wanting to wipe away any progress is if you lost a bunch of lives. Oh, wait, no, those don't matter anymore. Okay, even if you swapped out lives for tail saves, those are just there to be a buffer anyway. If you lose all of them, you would just be started back at a checkpoint. So even this one very specific example doesn't make any kind of sense. We weren't asking for much from this game. Just some simple quality of life improvements over the original. I mean, it is cute that they had some extra lines for Tails to say if you take advantage of some glitches for speedrunning, but even that is starting to feel less like an Easter egg and more of an excuse to not put more effort into this thing. It's like they cut open a gaping wound into this game and then try to fix it with some band-aids. But hey, at least these band-aids have fun patterns. That's not to say I don't appreciate some of the things brought to the table by Ultimate. I love it when they re-release a game and try to do something new with it. That takes a lot of time and talent, but I also have to consider all the new issues that were also brought to the table. The obvious development mess swept under the rug, but still present on the game itself, and asking us to clear space to make room for all these abandoned ideas or full-on dev toolkits. When you take all of that into consideration, it's hard for a lot of us to look at these concepts as anything other than half measures, promising us new features that can largely be dismissed while bringing in a slew of issues that were not present in the original release. And I don't want Sega to yet again learn the wrong lessons and abandon good ideas that just need a little more fleshing out. I want to see what Rival Rush and the Tail Save could evolve into. I want to see an Unleashed Ultimate or a Generations Ultimate. Hell, you know what? I would take a Forces Ultimate. I've said it 1,000 times on social media. I would gladly take a remake of Sonic 06, but I need that polish. I need that confidence, and it's not here. I want them to see these projects through and give them the polish they deserve, because Colors Ultimate certainly took a little bit of that luster away. We already have modders, artists, this incredible talented community once again doing their best to bring out the full potential of yet another messy Sonic product. And once again, I'm floored. It's great seeing all this talent, and I'm glad Sega isn't trying to shut down this community, but I'm still mad at Sega. But you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna dive into some really out there ideas. Really big, ridiculous ones. Because Sonic Colors deserved more than this. It deserved a proper remake. Polish up that story a bit. That short cartoon, despite a couple of weird hiccups, was on the right path, and having the voice cast come back with all of their experience under their belt would have been awesome. Or bring the DS cutscenes to life. Have other Sonic characters pop by for cameos. Turn the overworld map into a 3D hub world and make every level look like the entrance to a ride. If Sonic Team wasn't going to make the game itself, then hand it off to Dimps if there's enough people that worked on the original Sonic projects. Give them the big console version. Or failing all of this crazy stuff, maybe stop treating the DS game like the lesser experience and slap it in as an unlockable. Tweak what you have to make it work on one screen and without a touchpad, but it's worth the effort. A part of what I feel is a complete Colors experience is now missing, and in its place are a bunch of extras nobody was asking for and few would truly miss. Yes, I know. This game is not a remake, it's a remaster, but it's barely one at that. This feels like a modder's first sloppy attempt at customizing a game, and it sucks that there is clearly so much here that was left unfinished. Data miners have found hints of a playable Metal Sonic, cutscene animations, and plenty of other things, and you have to wonder how much more special this project could have been if it was given the time to be finished instead of rushed onto shelves. I don't know if that's Sega management or if Blind Squirrel is actually run by blind squirrels, but the fact of the matter is, this release is a mess. Even the title, Ultimate, feels like it was only there to ride yet another Nintendo coattail and confuse a poor parent trying to pick up Smash Bros. Ultimate. Even the box art feels low effort. The original Wii and DS games had these beautiful foil covers, yet still allowing Sonic and the logo to vividly stand out against a beautifully detailed background. Even the back of the case was set up like an old school carnival poster. It felt like an ad for an actual interstellar amusement park, and this disc was your ticket for admission. Meanwhile, Ultimate looks like the cover for a Jazzercise VHS. Look at this big box, all for a horrible little keychain. Not Yacker, not the new Jade Wisp. They instead give you leftover Sonic movie merch that doesn't even match the final design. This is based off that original demon. Seriously, the only way you could be more blatant about this being a cash grab is if they flat out said that this was really only here to bring in new fans from the movie, and oh, that's right, that's exactly what they did. The Japanese special edition was certainly nice enough. I like the medallion in the book and the soundtrack, but that's nice just because it's kind of celebrating Sonic's legacy, not so much the game itself. Either way, none of the kitschy crap from either release really celebrates colors. And look, I know the original release of the game only came with the Sonic cap as a pre-order bonus, but let's be real, that's a pretty baller pre-order gift. But that said, Europe did get a special edition. You want to know what that included? It came with a Sonic action figure with Wisps. And yes, the DS game had its own special edition with different Wisp toys. And if that's not all, the Australian release got this and a Sonic Colors branded blue classic controller. Though I do have to point out that it is a little silly that they packed in a classic controller when they didn't give you the option to do a quick step on the D-pad, and I don't know, maybe they just didn't think about it back then, but why isn't that the case now? There's literally a D-pad on every modern controller. But who knows? Maybe a patch will fix it. Maybe a patch will fix this ugly Sonic baby keychain and turn it into something more relevant. Patches will fix everything, I guess. Don't worry about it, guys. It's God. Oh, God, Twitter makes me so mad. I think I'm the game apologist. Just expect better. Why don't you expect better? God. Despite the constant infighting in the Sonic community or being exhaustingly defensive against the wider gaming audience, the one thing I think most fans can agree on with this franchise, regardless of how much you love it, is that it's very inconsistent. But one of the few consistencies I have seen throughout the entirety of this franchise is Sega not learning from their mistakes. Ironically, at the same time, while they are desperately trying to learn from their mistakes. I've been on this ride way too many times. They deviate away from a formula right as they're close to perfecting it for something strange and unpolished. Unique, but then again, they don't commit enough to that to see its full potential, only to return to a safer set of mechanics, yet somehow completely botching that up. And in between all of that, taking cherished titles for another go-around and dragging them down in the mud with the jankier entries. That's not every time. I'm a fan of some of the collections, and the Whitehead mobile ports, Sonic R, CD, and Fighters have made genuine quality of life improvements, brought back scrap material, brought them some really interesting customization, all while retaining their flawed, goofy core gameplay experiences. That's why I respect them so much. Yes, maybe there are problems with the core mechanics of the games, but they still made them the very best they could be without taking away from their identity. But for every one of those releases, we get Sonic Adventure DX, or Sonic 1 GBA, and unfortunately, Ultimate is in that latter camp. And while I understand why they would try to appeal to a Mario crowd with a Mario-inspired Sonic game, I have to wonder, what was wrong with the first time they dropped Sonic on Nintendo hardware? They went for the GBA and GameCube for the very same reasons. They figured Sonic would appeal to Mario fans. But there, they did indeed make a genuine back-to-basics classic-styled Sonic game, and they also ported over one of the most confidently defined 3D Sonic games with Adventure 2. And look, feel however you want about either of those games. Trust me, I've got plenty of my own opinions, but I can still point to both, different as they may be, yet still confidently say, yeah, this is what I would consider a proper Sonic game. And when you consider the purpose of the original release of Colors, I can't help but also consider why this game for the 30th anniversary. This game catered to Mario fans. Is this just a somewhat sloppy port job, or are we still continuing to ride the coattails of Nintendo? Sure, this upcoming Sonic game looks like it's going to be a change of pace, but how are we not sure that Sonic Team just isn't copying a different Nintendo property that made waves years ago? After all that, you could, understandably, think that I had a pretty horrible time with Sonic Colors, but honestly, I think I had a better time than not. It can be hard to find any enjoyment when you are so fixated on your frustrations, and clearly I have more than my fair share. But the more I played of this game, any version of this game, the more I loved it and appreciated what this game brought to the table. Because when you fixate on the Mario-ness of everything going on, you can miss out on just how much Sonic design actually shines through. This brilliant setting that is unlike anything else I've played in any other video game. How rewarding it is to master these mechanics while you snatch up red rings. And yes, I had issues early on with random homing attacks, but they do give you a giant red reticle to pay attention to. And hell, even Ultimate's perfect homing attack makes you pay that much more attention. It's a mechanic that helps you improve your own skills. And muddled under all the sound effects and music are some of the funniest jokes I have ever heard in the Sonic franchise. I cannot recall a time I have openly laughed at any game in this franchise. But some of these PA announcements, I laughed like an idiot. These are fantastic. Yeah, seriously, Sonic Colors, the game that brought you Baldy McNose hair, also has jokes about oxygen starvation and being baked alive in an oven. Wait.
There's no line at Fake Me Crazy, the ride that simulates what it's like to be baked like a cake. The ride itself lasts an amazing 20 to 25 minutes or until golden brown. Not recommended for our guests who are sensitive to temperatures exceeding 350 degrees.
Oh my god. I still stand by everything I've said up to this point, but I do understand how it can feel like a little bit of whiplash. Do I love or hate this game? Well, hopefully I've at least conveyed that the conversation is a little more nuanced than that. But for the sake of clarity, let's review. First part, we broke down all the new aspects from the boost abilities and all the color abilities and made a lot of comparisons to Mario-styled game design, talking about how blatant Sonic Team was when appealing to the Wii crowd, in a more critical light, let's say. Yet in part 2, I tried to explain why it would make sense to appeal to that crowd. Iizuka himself explained as much in interviews, wanting to build off the success of the Mario and Sonic Olympic Games. And I do need to clarify, that doesn't mean I approve of this direction, I just understand why they made that decision. But I also spent a little time pointing out that there's actually a lot of Sonic's origins sprinkled throughout the game design itself. Granted, I don't think they fully captured what made those games so great, but at the same time, the effort is still there. And something they did manage to do, they captured that creativity, the unique sights and sounds that you could only find with Sonic the Hedgehog, bringing us a soundtrack and environments that rival, if not flat out surpass, a lot of elements from those original games. Yes, there is a lot of Mario here, and that might have helped lead us to Lost World, but people seem to forget that Colors first led us to Generations, and you cannot tell me that game did not do its homework. And that is also including what Dimps brought to the table. It is so ridiculous just how much of the handheld legacy is flat out forgotten when it comes to this franchise, when many would argue that some of the greatest elements of Sonic the Hedgehog were found on handheld systems while the series was floundering on consoles. Whether or not you liked the DS version over the console version wasn't the point of part 2. My point was that the complete ultimate Sonic Colors experience is playing both versions of the game. And that is something that Sonic Colors Ultimate is always going to lack. And yes, I know Blind Squirrel has continued to work on the game post-launch, and I do appreciate that, but we need to have a serious conversation about the state of these remasters we have been seeing this entire year, because it is getting ridiculous. I wrote this entire script before the GTA trilogy even dropped, and now that that is out, Rockstar can't even take care of those revolutionary games. I understand that there's a pandemic happening, and I understand that things have been a little bit wacky for a long time, but there comes a time where we need to stop giving them the benefit of the doubt and expect a little bit better when we pay money for these products. We need to stop saying that it's okay to release an unfinished game, especially a game that was completed over a decade ago. And I know some of you are going to come back to this and scoff and say, well, none of that matters now because they patched the game. And for those people, you're welcome, because these changes don't happen without that backlash. We're not critiquing this because we hate Sonic Colors. If you've learned anything from these videos, I hope that you understand that despite my criticisms, there's a lot to respect about these games. No, Ultimate is not the most egregious release this year. And yeah, they've patched out plenty of the problems. A lot of the people that picked this up during a Black Friday sale or in a thrift store years down the road, they'll probably never have to deal with corrupted saves or seizure-inducing glitches, but we cannot forget that these issues happened at all. Because as dated as this particular video might sound to some of you, history keeps repeating itself within this franchise. It is Sonic's 30th anniversary. We are now 15 years from the 15th anniversary. This notorious time in the franchise's life. That is plenty of time to learn from those mistakes. And instead, I'm finding the entire AAA gaming industry following suit of Sonic 06. Sonic, you've already already made these mistakes, and now you have the opportunity to lead the rest of the gaming industry to a better path. You want people to forget 06? Then you don't drag down one of your great games like Colors into the mud and into that conversation. What this game represented back in 2010 can be represented best here, with Sonic smashing through the notorious Sonic cycle. For a brief time, Sonic was back, and everybody was celebrating. This game represented a step in the right direction. And when you look at what Ultimate is now, over 10 years later, the narrative has entirely changed. Take care of this legacy. Take care of this fan base. Take care of this icon. Because Sonic Colors should never be a stopgap. And even when it is, we should not have to wait months for it to reach the bare minimum we should have expected at launch. It does grow exhausting, giving the same critiques, making the same points over and over and over again. But guess what, buddy? I've been here all 30 years, and I'm not about to leave now. I said it in so many words back in my first video, but I'm gonna say it again. When someone you love f***s up, you don't ignore it. You grab them by the collar, you look them in the eye, and you say, hey, stop f***ing up, because I see your potential, Sonic. And yeah, it sucks that this is another misstep in a long road of missteps, but that doesn't mean Colors can't be re-released somewhere down the road. That doesn't mean Colors DS or the original Wii version aren't still great games, and that doesn't mean you can't enjoy Colors Ultimate on any level. Again, I do appreciate that Blind Squirrel is at least trying to right the ship, but learn from this, because I know you can. And when you do, then we will see your ultimate form. That is going to do it for today, guys. Thank you so much for sticking around for this extra long video, well, series, depending on how you're experiencing this, because I will be slapping this all together pretty soon, so this video essay can take its ultimate form. I just stopped reading the script at the end there and just went on an emotional rampage, so I hope that was conveyed well enough, because I'm not about to re-record that. Honestly, as frustrated as I get, I have always loved Sonic, and I'm always gonna love Sonic. And if you want to hear me talk about the Hedgehog a little more often and a little more topical, then go check out my podcast, Sunset City, a Sonic podcast for the classic and modern age, hosted by me, Cirrus the Skeptic, Wayne is Boss, and Channel Pup. I'm very proud of the work I do with those boys, and if you haven't partaken yet, I think you might enjoy it. And if you want to pitch in and help me out, because I'm doing this full time now, then you can pitch in over on patreon.com. Got those links down below. So thank you for any newcomers jumping on board, but an extra special thank you to all the people you're seeing on screen right now who are already supporting me, and honestly, thank you guys so much. And because these folks threw in a little bit extra, let me give them an extra special named thank you. And I can't believe how many names I have to list off here. Those names including Kyle Winter, Joseph Duncan Sonic 2 Blue, John, Casey Colors, Faizan Razul, Zanderoni the Painter, Trey Nobles, Hatsworth, Nick S, Tristan Trapp, Meekers, Dun Dun, Miles the Prower, Jeremy Singer, Mr. Boo J, Rain, Sam Webster, Dwight Graham, Fish Flop, Lucas Lipker, The Bad Pal, Shoden, Mr. SP, Cecil the Glade, The Dark Neon, Missing No, Stefan Plakanica, 3 Monic, Graham J. Hall, Leonard X, Wayne is Boss, Jamie Chevalier, Letterick, 64 Bits, Ryan Rolfs, The Lumberjack, Miles Prower Radio Hour, Otis Small, ya boy, Shifting Flesh, Mute, Trash Baphomet, Autumn from Twitter.com, and Sodden Suzuki. I had to cut off the original thank yous from when I first recorded this script because we had a handful more people join in on the Patreon in that time, and honestly, it's still mind-blowing to me. I can't comprehend the generosity of you people. I sincerely thank you so much. And honestly, I didn't think I would have this much to talk about with Sonic Colors, so be patient with me when we get back to Sonic himself, because I imagine when we get to some of the bigger 3 3D games, we're gonna have a lot to pick apart, and once I get some new computer equipment, I'd really like to give this an unhealthy amount of time to pick apart and ramble about. But I've done enough rambling for a while, so I'm gonna get going. Thank you all for watching, and reach for the stars, Sonic Warriors. Spoilers for how babies are made.